The ability to run this at scale is going to happen because we're getting better and better at creating silicon that specializes in doing things in a massively parallelized way. And the cost of energy at the same time is getting cheaper and cheaper along with it. When you multiply these two things together, the effect of it is that you'll be able to run these models. The same output today will cost 1/10, as long as you ride the energy and compute curve for the next few years. So that's just going to naturally happen. I have two interesting takeaways. And one is maybe a little bit of a sidebar. So the sidebar is, if you guys were sitting on top of something that you thought was as foundational as Google search back in 1999, would you have sold 49% of it for $10 billion?
Hard no.
I think the answer is no. I think the answer is no.
Not in an environment where you have unlimited ability to raise capital.
This is something that we've said before, which is that ChatGPT is an incredibly important innovation, but it's an element of a platform who will get quickly commoditized because everybody will compete over time. And so I think what Microsoft is doing is the natural thing for somebody on the outside looking in at an entity that has 93% share of a very valuable category, which is, how can I scorch the earth? And so Microsoft effectively, for $10 billion, bought almost 50% of a tool, and now will make that tool as pervasive as possible so that consumer expectations are such that Google is forced to decay the quality of their business model in order to compete. So that, as Friedberg said, you have to invest in all kinds of compute resources that today are still somewhat expensive. And that will flow into the P&L. And what you will see is that the business quality degrades. And this is why when Google did the demo of Bard, the first thing that happened was a stock went off 500 basis points. They lopped off $100 billion of the market cap, mostly in reaction to, oh my God, this is not good for the long-term business.
Explain why it's not good for the long-term business on a mechanical basis. When you get an answer, you don't have to click the links?
No, right now, if you look at Google's business, they have the best business model ever invented on earth ever for a profit company. It just rains money. This is a business that this year will do almost $100 billion of free cash flow. It's a business that has to find ways, and we kind of joke, but they have to find ways to spend money. Otherwise, they'd be showing probably 50 or 60% EBITDA margins, and people would wonder, hey, wait a minute, you can't let something like this go unattended. So they try to do a lot more things to make that core treasure look not as incredible as it is. They have $120 billion of cash. This is a business that's just an absolute juggernaut, and
they have 10 times as many employees as they need to run the core business. That says enough.
I don't know what that is, but my point is that it's an incredible business. So that business will get worse if Microsoft takes a few hundred basis points of share, if Meta takes a few hundred basis points of share, if Tencent does, if a few startups do. Quora, by the way, launched something called Poe, which I was experimenting and playing around with last weekend. If you add it all up, what Satya said is true, which is even if all we do collectively as an industry is take 500 or 600 basis points of share away from Google, it doesn't create that much incremental cost for us, but it does create enormous headwinds and pressure for Google with respect to how they're valued and how they will have to get revalued. And that's what happens. So the last thing I'll say is, the question that I've been thinking about is, what does Sundar do? Right? So what's the countermeasure?
Yes, this is what I was going to get to.
I think the countermeasure here, if I was him, is to go to the board and say, guys, we're going to double TAC. Right? So TAC is the traffic acquisition cost that Google pays their publishers. It is effectively their way of guaranteeing an exclusivity on search traffic. So for example, if you guys have an iPhone, it's Google Search. That's the default search in the iPhone. Google pays Apple. This year, this renegotiation for that deal could mean that Apple gets paid $25 billion for giving away that right to Google. So if Google does all these kinds of deals. Last year, they spent, I think, $45 billion or so. So about 21%.
In a way, when you think about that, Chamath, Google basically paid Apple, which was working on search technology. They were working on a search solution. They paid them to stay out of the business.
And they're paying everybody. So I think the question for Google is the following. If you think you're going to lose share, and let's say you go to 75% share, would you rather go there and actually still maintain your core stranglehold on search? Or do you actually want 75% share where now all of these other competitors have been seeded, Well, you can decay business model quality and still remain exclusive if you just double the TAC. And what you do is you put all these other guys on their heels because, as we talked about, if you're paying publishers 2 times more than what anybody else is paying them, you'll be able to get publishers to say, hey, you know what? Don't let those AI agents crawl your website because I'm paying you all this money. Remember that, right? So do not crawl in robots.txt equivalent for these AI agents. And I think that that'll put Microsoft and all these other folks on their heels. And then as you have to figure out all this derivative work stuff, all these lawsuits, Google will look pristine because they can say, I'm paying these guys double because I acknowledge that this is a core part of the service. So that's the game theory I think that has to get figured out.
Google v. Microsoft. Who will win the AI chatbot race? Google and Microsoft both announced plans for AI-enhanced search this week, taking the artificial intelligence space race into a new phase. However, the launch of the former's new chatbot, Bard, misfired badly when the error appeared in a demo. Microsoft announced on Tuesday that it was using the technology behind ChatGPT, developed by the San Francisco-based company OpenAI, to enhance its Bing search engine and Edge web browser. Hello and welcome to Money Talks. In today's video, Chamath Palihapitiya gives us his opinion about the future of AI and the war between Google versus Microsoft.
TAC has to become a weapon on the forward foot, number one. So if you're going to spend 21% of your revenue on TAC, you should be willing to spend 30 to 40% to maintain the 93% market share. I don't think what you want to see is your profit dollars decay because you lose share. It's rather better for you to spend the money and decay your business model than have someone decay it for you. In general.
Apple, at this point, Apple is really the only TAC line item.
No, I understand. I understand. I'm not talking about today. I'm saying take that idea. You have an entire sales team whose job it is right now to sell AdSense, right? You have an entire group of people who know how to account for TAC and how to think about it as a cost. But if you're basically willing to say, out of the $100 billion of free cash flow, I'm willing to go to 80 or 70 billion of free cash flow, combined with the 100 billion of short and long-term investments I have, and I'm going to use it as a weapon. And I'm going to go and make sure that all of these publishers have a new kind of agreement that they sign up for, which is, I'll do my best to help you monetize. You do your best by being exclusive to our AI agents, right? So you deprive other models of your content on your pages, because that will get litigated, and there is no way, just like, again, if you say do not crawl, you're not allowed to crawl if you're Google or Microsoft or search it. So, this is going to happen for these agents. It's unrealistic to expect that it won't. So my point is, Google should do this and define how it's done before it's defined for them, because right now people are in this nascent phase where everybody thinks everybody's going to be open and get along, and I just think that that's unrealistic. I'm saying when you look at transformer architecture today, every LLM that you write on the same corpus of underlying data for training will get to the same answer. So my point is, today, if you're a company, the most important thing that you can do, especially if you have a $1 trillion plus market cap that could get competed away, is to figure out how to defend it. And so all I'm saying is, from the perspective of a shareholder of Google, and also from the perspective of I was a board of director or a senior executive or the CEO, this should be the number one thing that I'm thinking about. And my framing of how to answer that question is build a competitive moat around two things. One is at the end, which is how much money and what kind of relationship do I have with my customers, including the publishers, and can I give them more so that number two is I can affect who they decide to contribute their content to. So you're right. Let's assume that there are 5 of these infinite libraries in the world.
You mean non-public content?
How important, and also public, how important is it if Quora says, you know what, guys, I've done a deal where my billions of page views and all of that really rich content, Quora has incredible content, Google's paying me $2 billion a year, and so I've decided to only let Google's AI agents crawl it. And so maybe when there are questions that Quora is already doing a phenomenal job of answering, I think it does make a difference that Google now has access to Quora's content and others don't.
The competitor to the Microsoft-backed ChatGPT was asked about the telescope, and one of the answers displayed said it took the very first pictures of a planet outside of our own solar system. Experts were quick to notice the inaccuracy, as were investors. Shares in Alphabet, Google's parent, lost $163 billion in value over Wednesday and Thursday. The company remains a $1 TN plus behemoth, in large part because of its dominance in search. But for how long?
I said, how many engineers do you think it would take you, and how long would it take you to build a competitor? That was just a thought exercise. It would take hundreds of millions of dollars and years. Now imagine you were feeling threatened by Stripe. Imagine you're a large company. Visa, MasterCard, just as an example. You can now actually get one or two really smart people like him to lead an effort where you would say, here's a couple $100 million to compete with Stripe, but here are the boundary conditions. Number one is you can only hire 5 or 10 engineers. And so what you would do is you would actually use tools like this to write the code for you. And the ability to write code is going to be the first thing that these things do incredibly well with absolute precision. You can already do unit testing incredibly well, but it's going to go from unit testing to basically end-to-end testing. And you'll be able to build a version of Stripe extremely quickly and in a very lean way. So then the question is, well, what would you do with the 200 or 300 million you raised? And my thought is you use it, again, as tack. You go
acquire customers.
You go to customers and you're like, well, listen, if Braintree is going to charge you 1 basis point over Visa, MasterCard, 100 basis points, and Stripe will 50, you know what? I'll charge 10.
Margin destruction.
Margin destruction.
Totally. And this is going to make everything.
That's what's so interesting. You can take any business that's a middleman business. I think this is the point. Any middleman business right now that doesn't have its own competitive moat can be competed against. Because now you can take all of those input costs that go into human capital, you can defer that, have a much smaller human capital pool, and push all of that extra money into traffic acquisition. Go back to traditional capitalism for a second. So please go back, because the Stripe example is another good one. So if you have this business model, right, how does the ecosystem get efficient, right? How do we create more opportunity, to use Friedberg's language? Well, the only way that it really happens, how does costs go down, is that certain entities become big enough that they can drive the prices down, right? An Uber, a DoorDash, or whomever says, yes, I need payments capability. So Braintree, give me your best bid. Checkout.com, give me your best bid. Adyen, give me your best bid. Stripe, give me your best bid. You compete it down, right? Amazon comes in. Walmart comes in. They do it in physical CPG goods. They do it online. They do it for all kinds of technologies. But you've never had an internal form that can create hyper efficiency and basically create customer value like this thing can, because this thing can allow,
let me show you an example,
jillion 10-person companies to get created that can do the work of 10,000 people. That's so cool.
So what do you think about Chamath's take on AI? Tell us in the comments. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you soon with the next video. Thank you so much for watching.